Hello and welcome back to your Pennsylvania Dutch Minute. We continue our mini-series on famous Pennsylvania Dutchmen, and the majority of the videos that I've done so far have been about people that have really, made an impact beyond just Pennsylvania Dutch country. People like President Dwight Eisenhower and Governor Snyder, and we talk about Conrad Weiser. I mean, their influence and their importance stretches beyond just Pennsylvania Dutch country. Those are names that were people that were influential in the bigger picture of American history. But today we turn our attention to someone who really is probably unknown outside of Pennsylvania Dutch country, but within Pennsylvania Dutch country was someone that was a household name. And for a lot of you that probably follow my YouTube series and my videos, is someone that you might hold very dear to your heart, and that is the one and only Professor Schnitzel. No one, I think, in the scheme of Pennsylvania Dutch media, can take his place. We have famous authors, and I want to do some videos on them in the future, and we have people that dedicated their lives to the preservation of our language and our culture. But Professor Schnitzel is someone that I have a hard time making this video because to me, I grew up listening to Professor Schnitzel recordings, as I'm sure many of you did as well. Your grandparents had the little 45 records or a cassette tape. If you're old enough, maybe you even were lucky enough to see him perform live. I'd love to have been able to have done that. His stand-up comedy was the comedy and the humor of us, of the rural Pennsylvania Dutch. I don't think anybody captured our culture, our humor, our essence better than Schnitzel. I know that's a very bold statement to make, but to him, when I listen to Professor Schnitzel do his routines, it takes me to a certain place, and for each of you that's probably something different. It takes me to my grandparents' kitchen, where we listened to him on record on Sundays after church while we were eating lunch, and seeing the joy that he brought my grandparents as they would laugh out loud at his jokes, even though they'd heard him 85, 100 times. They still made them laugh every time we listened to it. And to me, I've heard his routines many, many, many times, but still, every time I listen to them, it makes me laugh and it makes me feel at home. His jokes are dated. He makes jokes that my generation wouldn't understand from a way of life that we never experienced. We only experienced it through our parents and our grandparents telling us about it, but yet it's funny. And I think that is the testimony of Professor Schnitzel, that it has stood the test of time. But I think a lot of people probably don't really know too much about who he was and what his history is. So I'd just like to briefly talk about him, and I had to do some research because it was difficult to find information about him. I expected there to be a lot more out there, but really there's not that much on the internet. Professor Schnitzel, of course, was his stage name. His real name, he was born Theodore L. Rickenbach in Reading, Pennsylvania, Berks County in 1903. He was the son, of course, of Pennsylvania Dutch people Jonathan and Mary Steiner Rickenbach. He grew up and he got into various jobs early on in life. He started out working for the Reading Company. I'm not quite sure what they were, but his job was managing amusement park rides and other jobs within the city. In 1932, he broke into the world of radio on the station WEEU in Reading, which is still an AM station in Reading. And at that time, he was partnered up with a guy by the name of Earl Chappell, and they kind of did this two-man comedy team called Schnitz and Earl on the radio. In 1950, and they did that for quite a number of years. In 1950, then, another competing radio station in Reading, WHUM, hired Schnitzel to work with another man by the name of Alan Lane on a 1-hour-long program at 6 a.m. on Mondays through Saturdays. And that's kind of, I guess, where he really started taking off. It would be on that show that he would then become find fame, and then he would be hired out to speak at Groundhog Lodge meetings, various Pennsylvania Dutch festivals, church picnics, community picnics, and other gatherings all over Pennsylvania Dutch country, from Easton to as far as even State College, Pennsylvania. Through the 1950s, Professor Schnitzel, or as he was better known, Professor Hermann F. Schnitzel, the mayor of Turkey Hollow, was a familiar figure on the stage of the Pennsylvania Dutch Folk Festival, what today is the Kutztown Folk Festival, and there were thousands of visitors each year that would come just to see him do his routine. And it was stand-up comedy, but it was Pennsylvania Dutch stand-up comedy. He had this earthy humor that we are known for. Some people think maybe a lot of our jokes tend to be a little bit on the dirty side, dealing with farming jokes, and there's a lot of manure jokes and things like that. And yeah, it's not necessarily for everybody, but for us, I think it really speaks to who we are as a people. He had this sense of timing, and when you listen, a good comedian always does, when you listen to him do his routines, he holds you and then delivers that punchline. And it really, it worked. His jokes were of that small town, made up Pennsylvania Dutch community that so many people could completely associate with. And he laughed on stage, and I think that's what always makes me the most, laugh too. I laughed along with him, and when you listen to these live recordings that are still available, you hear the entire audience just laughing along, and it speaks a lot. Luckily, as I said, he was recorded. There are records that are available. I don't know if they've been digitized at all. I do know that on YouTube, and I'll include a link in the messages below this video to some live recordings that you can listen to of him. So there are some out there online. According to what I could find, they first started recording his stuff in 1961, and he did a series of about 5 or 6 little 45 records that came out, and they were really, really good. I mean, they're there, and it's preserved his jokes, his humor, but also I think our humor in a good way. Schnitzel was equally good as a stand-up comedian, imparting a string of hilarious jokes, but also almost to the point, he was a really good monologuist, where he could connect his jokes and his sketches using true Pennsylvania Dutch experiences. Sometimes I think, he and Garrison Keillor, if you're familiar with him, could have sat down and had a pretty good conversation. Garrison could tell his stories about his fictitious Lake Wobegon, and Schnitzel could give his stories about the Turkey Hollow, and I think that, it speaks a lot to us. It really does. He did write all his own material, and that's what he was known for. Everything from his experiences as a draftee in World War I to which is always a really funny one, to stories of him going to France in World War I, and then just day-to-day life in this fictitious town that he created of Turkey Hollow. He did die in July of 1969 in Reading, and he's buried in the Forest Hills Memorial Park Cemetery. I know that a lot of you out there know Professor Schnitzel. You grew up with him, and he probably holds a very special place in your heart. I don't think, if you're Pennsylvania Dutch, Professor Schnitzel has to be a part of your Pennsylvania Dutch background in some way or another. And if you are one of the few out there, maybe you're a younger, one of the younger generation people out there that are watching my videos and are interested in Pennsylvania Dutch, I welcome you to go out there on YouTube and listen to some of these, and hopefully you will find as much joy and laughter from Schnitzel's stories and jokes as I have over the years, and as so many Pennsylvania Dutchmen have as well. He truly was a blessing and a gift to us and to our people and to our culture, and luckily, his humor has been preserved and will hopefully live on in generations to come. And it's a snapshot of us in the early 1900s through the mid-1900s as to who the Pennsylvania Dutch people were, what made us laugh, and I think that speaks volumes to also who we are as a people. I think you can judge a lot about a group of people as to what they find funny. It tells us a lot about us as a people. And I think that even though his stuff is still dated, it is jokes about outhouses, and, none of us have outhouses anymore or use them on a regular basis, it still makes us laugh. And I think that's just in our DNA, that type of humor. It's part of who we are. Embrace it. I do. In my other YouTube series, Ask a Pennsylvania Dutchman, I'm not going to lie, a lot of the jokes that I try to bring out and the funny stories that my partner Chris and I try to do in that series, I mean, I think I draw inspiration from Professor Schnitzel. I'd lie if I didn't think that was true. And I try not to steal material, of course, but it's that sense of humor that I grew up with, that my grandparents used around me, that great uncles and great aunts used around me, the things that made us laugh at holidays and around the kitchen table, etc. And I'm sure that applies to many of you out there. So it was an absolute, I rambled a lot, but I could sit and extol the value and the importance of Professor Schnitzel forever. He truly is a gift, was a gift. And I'm so glad that he did what he did and that we have recordings of it. Again, if you've never heard him, I'll include a link. Check it out. If you have an idea for a future video, email me. My email address is at the end. And please, in the comment section below this video, leave a comment and let me know what's your favorite Professor Schnitzel joke, or how important was Professor Schnitzel to your family? What role did he play? Did you grow up listening to him with your grandparents or with your parents? Or if you were lucky enough, did you see him live? And what was that like? How was he live and in person? I'd love to read those comments, and I'm sure everybody else would love and enjoy reading those comments as well. I'll stop now. Go find, for the next 10 minutes, go find some Professor Schnitzel recordings and listen to them. I guarantee you will be laughing. But until next time, keep practicing the Pennsylvania Dutch. Email me if you have any ideas or questions or concerns. And until next time, Max gut.